May 12th, 2020 Finance Committee meeting. With us this evening, committee members present, Councilor Zarella, Councilor Kuchmarek, Councilor Walsh, and Councilor Boschman just joined, and myself, Councilor Di Natale. I also have here taking minutes, City Auditor and Finance Director Calvin Brooks. And we have several attendees this evening for speaking to the matters that are before the committee. I do not have any communications from the clerk on anyone who has registered from the public to speak at this meeting. So without further ado, if there's no objections from the committee, I will take up the first three orders that pertain to the DPW with respect to snow and ice removal and the cemetery expansion. So we will start with 104-20, order that there be and hereby is transferred the sum of $132,000, same to be charged against reserve for snow and ice removal and credited to the following Department of Public Works snow and ice accounts. Equipment rental, $82,000, salt, $50,000. 105-20, in order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $168,000 to be charged against reserve for snow and ice removal and credited to cemetery capital expenses, cemetery expansion, for the purpose of expanding the Forest Hill Cemetery. And 106-20, in order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $7,000 to be charged against snow and ice overtime and credited to cemetery capital expenses, cemetery expansion, for the purpose of expanding the Forest Hill Cemetery. I have a communication from the Commissioner of the Public Works dated May 12th to the Council's Finance Committee. Fiscal year 2020 winter operations have completed at a total of $837,500, a 15% decrease compared to the 10-year average cost of $983,826. These savings were realized even though we increased contractors' reimbursement rates by $5 per hour and transitioned to using salt instead of sand on half of the city streets. These management initiatives increased efficiency and provided a higher level of service. The transition from sand to salt will also decrease the associated time and cost of street sweeping, clearing out catch basins, and cleaning the drainage sewer system. While the winter was mild in temperature, we still received 69 inches of snow, 96% of the average, and an increase of 28% from the last year's total. Additionally, the warmer weather caused 8 ice events due to rain with ice precipitation during periods when the air pavement temperatures are below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Even with the increased snowfall, DPW hours fell by 19%, contractor hours fell by 24%, and the amount of salt increased only 1.7%. The winter comparisons between FY20 and FY19 are shown in Table 2. City Council had originally appropriated $500,000 for snow and ice operations with a $600,000 reserve for FY20 for a total of $1.1 million. The reserves were drawn down in January 2020 in the amount of $300,000, and a final request is in front of you in the amount of $132,000, leaving a surplus of $168,000 in the reserve account. There is an additional surplus of $54,500 in the labor account. DPW is respectfully asking that the surplus snow and ice reserve amount of $168,000 be transferred to the cemetery expansion project, and that $7,000 of the $54,500 surplus snow and ice labor be transferred to the cemetery account for engineering services associated with the expansion. Expanding the Forest Hill Cemetery will produce an estimated $1.6 million in revenue, with 65% going to the general account, a return on investment of 594%. With that, those three agenda items in the communication I read, I will allow Commissioner of Public Works Basanetto to expand upon that further if he wishes.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I think the communication lays out all the numbers for you to consider. Like we said, we did some management initiatives last year that allowed us to decrease a lot of the costs, allowing us to have a surplus in the accounts. We would like to transfer those surpluses to the cemetery to build out the expansion. Right now, we have about 200 grave sites left. This expansion would add about 800 grave sites. With COVID-19 and all these things happening right now, we feel like an expansion serves the city's needs. And it would also provide a positive revenue on the investment, return of investment of over 500%. So each gravesite is sold. A portion of that cost is put into perpetual care for the cemetery, and the rest goes into the general accounts. So I'm open to answer any of your questions.
So I have two. First one is this 168? How much is the total cost of the expansion?
Yes, Chairman. The total, we estimate the total to be $175,000. So $175,000 includes both the engineering costs, which is $7,000 coming out of the personnel account, and then the $168,000. And the $168,000 basically boils down to we have to build some internal roads. So that's going to be about $100,000. We're going to have to build a small retaining wall. This is right across from Memorial Middle School right there. So we're going to have to build a little retaining wall that's about $40,000, and landscaping and odds and ends. So in the end, it comes to about $175,000.
And the 1.6 million in revenue, that is the total amount we expect to collect for the 800 sites that'll be expanded upon?
Yes, sir. We anticipate that the 800 grave sites sold, about $560,000 will go into that perpetual care account that the cemetery runs. Mm-hmm. And the remaining $1,040,000 will be going into the general account, the city's general accounts.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any questions from the committee?
I make a motion we accept.
Second.
Motion has been made and motion has been made and seconded to accept 104-20, 105-20, and 106-20. And this will require a roll call vote on the three orders. So without further ado, I'll Calvin, if you're okay, I'll call the roll.
Yes, sir.
President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Vice President Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Boschman,
Definitely, yes.
Councilor Zarella,
Yes.
and Councilor Di Natale, yes. So that is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to 107-20. In order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $600,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to Community Development Capital Expenses Construction Account for the Downtown Transformation Project. And bear with me, please. Communication here from Tom Skowerski, the Executive Director of Community Development, which was submitted on April 29th to the mayor, which states as follows: I respectfully request the appropriation of $600,000 from free cash to be utilized towards the Downtown Transformation Project. These funds will be used to make comprehensive improvements to Main Street and Boulder Drive, transforming both roads to two-way traffic and implementing a series of complete streets improvements. The bulk of the costs will be incurred with intersection changes where Boulder and Main meet at the eastern and western ends of downtown, and new signals where Putnam intersects with Main and Boulder. The project was initially slated to begin in the summer of 2020, but given delays due to the COVID-19 outbreak, it is now scheduled to begin in the spring of 2021. The City of Fitchburg has received $3.3 million in funding from the state through the Mass Works and Complete Streets programs, respectively, and will also be funded through CDBG. This appropriation request will fill the gap between these funding sources, allowing for increased contingencies during this uncertain time, cost escalations due to construction season delays, and will ensure that the project budget affords us with the ability to ensure an optimal outcome on this critical project. Mr. Skowerski, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, just briefly, and good evening, councilors. Thank you all for taking this item up tonight. As you recall, in fall of 2019, I came in front of you for two agenda items: the $3 million grant for the Mass Works program, $399,000 from the Complete Streets program, of which $320 $100,000 is allocated for this project in particular. The remainder is going to another project on Electric Avenue. I had mentioned in submitting that letter that there might be a need for additional free cash allocations. Certainly when I submitted that request in fall, I couldn't have anticipated why I would be asking. But I am in front of you today for a few reasons and a few what I would call, I guess, standard changes to the design that have taken place throughout the last few months in the design process, but also thinking about the contingencies put in place by the current situation. So in terms of standard changes, although we did get $320,000 for the Complete Streets program to supplement this project, it wasn't necessarily a line for line supplement from what we budgeted for in the Mass Works program. For example, Complete Streets added sidewalks to the project, and we need to ensure the sidewalks are done correctly and through the full scope of what's needed, particularly on Boulder Drive. It also calls for a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, RFB, those things where you press a button and lights go on and you can cross the street safely. One additional one than what we originally had budgeted for, and that's at the Putnam Street garage right on Boulder Drive. So due to quirks in the Complete Streets programming, we are to some degree held to what we applied for in 2017 when we initially submitted our prioritization plan. So anyway, all of those projects are tied into this, but were supplementary to what we originally budgeted for. We also had a number of important changes from the public comment period, which started in early March and ended in early May. The most important of those were the closing of Cushing Street, which has been identified for years as a difficult intersection where we see Cushing and Blossom. And through department head meetings, public safety, Commissioner Bassanetto, I think we all agreed that there is no longer a need for Cushing Street, just given the other two-way changes that were taking place. And instead of simply installing jersey barriers and having a temporary fix, we really want to make sure it's done right. We're now having proposed a mill and overlay of the street, speed tables, and what we're actually going to be installing there. In addition to closing the street, we're listening to some of the concerns of the business community along that block. They'd like to see a loading and an unloading zone in that area and a space for trash storage, of which it's a very dense, tightly knit commercial district, and there aren't a lot of locations for that type of activity. So we're trying to solve both the traffic problem and a business one for the businesses, which was a main concern we heard in that comment period. In addition to that, we're incorporating a project that was a CDBG request on behalf of Commissioner Bassanetto and the Fitchburg Public Library to do some accessibility improvements along Newton Place. The bulk of that will be supported through CDBG funding, but it's also a change of scope from our original design work with Ty and Bond. And then in addition to that, there's some drainage work on Putnam that currently we had planned to bid out as an alternate because of cost, and this hopefully would give us some flexibility to take that on as part of the base bid. And then we have some uncertainty with the Water Street Bridge project. We just got our 25% designs, but it might require the city to alter our alignment underneath the bridge because of some abutment changes that will be taking place there. And we wanted to account for that contingency as well. So those are sort of what I would call standard things that might come along in any given project. And then, of course, the secondary aspect here is just the uncertainty posed by the current public health crisis. Certainly there appear to be some impacts on labor costs, whether it's delays of the project or the increased requirements, whether it's hand washing sinks or reduced workload for how many folks you can have at any given time on a construction project. We certainly, when we made this budget in August of 2019, we anticipated going out to bid about right now. And because of delays in the surveying, delays in the design and in the public comment period, we got to a point where we could either go out to bid in late fall and have a month of construction in 2020, or just have the construction begin that following spring. And that was ultimately the determination we made. But considering that design originally was estimated in August of 19, we're now moving construction to spring of 21. We wanted to account for cost escalations. And, you know, it brings me no joy in this current fiscal environment to come asking you for funds for this project. But, you know, I think we've talked quite a bit about this being sort of a generational opportunity here. We've been talking about this work and this project for 25 years for a reason. And a lot of that reason has to do with lack of funding. And I think we're in an exciting moment here, even given all the current conditions. And we really want to ensure that we have this funding in place to get this project done right. So we're not cutting corners. So we're not making compromises, but you know, we're taking advantage of this one opportunity that we're going to have to make a transformative change here in our built environment downtown. Ultimately, this will reflect about 15% of the project cost. We'll have about $450,000 will be from CDBG, and then the balance will be from state funds. And I'll leave it there and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Tom. Just to note for the committee and the public that right now our available funds balance is at 3.8 million. So if this appropriation were to go through, would bring it to 3.2 million remaining for the fiscal year. I have one question for you, Tom, and may not know this, but because this is an issue probably statewide. For these grant funds that we receive from the state for projects like this, because of the COVID-19 impact, which is of no fault of ours, obviously, do we have any idea where we have to bear the cost of those increases? Like you mentioned about project delays and the cost of labor, and it's all COVID related. The state's not going to come back and say, well, you know, we'll give you a little extra to cover that differential because it wasn't your fault. But is it just, that's the 3.3, we're not getting any more, and anything beyond that is on us?
Unfortunately, it's a good question. That appears to be the case. I think the flexibility they are affording us right now is really in scheduling. And I think both with the Mass Works and with, you know, the Complete Streets program, we've submitted memos to both EOHED and MassDOT to let them know, which I think is no surprise to them and is happening throughout the Commonwealth, that these delays are taking place. But as you all know as well, particularly wearing your finance hat, we're going to be needing the state's help in all kinds of ways. And I think they're needing to prioritize it accordingly, unfortunately.
Thank you. First, I have Councilor Zarella.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say this makes perfect sense. I wish we didn't have to spend the extra money. I'm sure we all do. But at this point, we're this far into the project. This isn't due to any mistakes on the part of anyone in Tom's office or anything like that. And we can go ahead with this, or we can leave everything on the table, which would be foolish. So I'm very, very much in favor of moving this along. In comparison to what we're getting out of this, this is a very manageable cost.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As Tom said earlier, he did give us a heads up when the grant was accepted that there would be funds from the city's end. We just didn't know how much that would be. I would assume that part of that 600,000, as he laid out, is due to COVID as a contingency, but a lot of that is the extra work that we were going to put into this to make it a real complete project. So, you know, I personally, you know, have no hesitation in doing this for the simple fact that we've been talking about this for almost 3 decades. And I don't believe $600,000 should hold us up on a project that the state is funding more than 3/4 of. So that's my opinion on that. I have Councilor Boschman, you wanted to speak.
Yep. Question for Tom. What did you say Cushing Street was going to become?
So it's going to be close to traffic, and it'll be a loading only zone for the businesses in that area. And additionally, we'll have some allowances for dumpsters. So if you think about what's happening with Mill Street, that's sort of the placemaking, the new sort of public park that we've created. Cushing Street will be like the back end of that. That's really where where the business work will take place in terms of loading and in terms of trash storage. If you look and Ann Cervantes knows this all too well because she's been kind enough to support us with dumpster relocation from Mill Street to the surface parking lot right there. And it's an eyesore, and it's a Band-Aid and a short-term solution. And this will allow us to actually move those dumpsters to the other side to Cushing. So it'll have a functional use, but no longer really serves the purposes of traffic as a way for folks to get onto the Water Street Bridge or get onto Main Street, because now there's multiple other avenues through which to do so.
So are you going to put a fence across Cushing Street so we won't be able to see the dumpsters in the road? Are we saying that?
I think it's a good question. It's frankly, before this idea came about, it was something we were considering at the Mill Street parking garage as well. And we'll still retain ownership of Cushing. So this won't be a case of, private owners on private property doing whatever they choose. I think we'll have a degree of control here. And certainly on Mill Street right now, we have a license agreement with the folks that have moved their dumpsters to the Mill Street garage. We'll look to do the same on Cushing and include along with that a series of design guidelines. And a fence would be a nice addition, and it's something I've already advocated for to the Mill Street Planning Committee that we need to budget for in the future.
Now, the other questions I have, number two. Are we putting sidewalks on the opposite side on Boulder Drive, and why are we?
The opposite side?
Well, you have sidewalks on where City Hall side or the former GE side going all the way up to Main Street and
Right.
coming all the way down to Back Main. Are we going to put them across the street, like on the garage side?
Right. So that kind of gets to what I had mentioned before in terms of getting the sidewalk thing right. So in our Complete Streets application, we called for $56,000 worth of sidewalk improvements. And I think we're going to have to look strategically at that 56 taken together with what we have here on, are there a few focused areas that we can make considerable improvements to sidewalks and not have it look like a patchwork? Because I think if we took, and Commissioner Bassanetto could likely attest to, if we had a $56,000 sidewalk improvement over this entire length of the project, it would be a Band-Aid solution. So I think we've got to have a few targeted areas. And, Boulder Drive was one of the items that was mentioned by our planning board chair in the public comment period, particularly around Wood Place and Newton Place. So, I think we're going to have to take a long, hard look at the new developments taking place with City Hall, with the theater block, and where those desire lines are, where people are walking to and from, as your example attests, when there will be instances where people are going from the Putnam Street garage to City Hall or to the theater block. We've got to make sure they've got a good avenue in which to do so that is safe and ADA accessible and is something we can be proud of, as really what we're going to be seeing in that area is a lot of new folks coming to the area as a destination. And we really want to put our best foot forward with the way that we have our sidewalks.
Mr. Chair, I got a question for the auditor, Calvin Brooks, first on this $600,000. With this virus that's going around and the city the way it is, and businesses not being operating, and we're losing a lot of money from different things, are we going to have the funds to support everybody coming next year? Or should we hold off on this $600,000 and worry about the employees?
Counselor, that's a good question. I think this year we're going to finish the year okay. We're still reviewing some things for this year and then looking ahead to next year, given what's going on with the coronavirus emergency. I think the impact is going to be felt more next year than this year. One of the things you have to watch out for, though, with an appropriation like this or with free cash generally, is it's still one-time money. And so a project like this makes sense because it's one-time funding. It's also something that we've committed on earlier. We're in the process of trying to wrap up the financing on this. A project like this starting anew, I think, would end up being delayed. And rightly so, because I think for next year, we're going to have some things to talk about.
Well, are you telling me that we can't carry that $600,000 over to next year in case there's really a shortfall? And then we have to start laying off city employees? I mean, I get no problem laying off if that's what we're going to do. But if we can save their jobs, I mean, hold off on this thing. It isn't the end of the world. We waited 3 decades. What's another year or two? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying, but I think this particular project is pretty far along. You also have to remember that we do have funds in stabilization, which can help us through an extreme situation as well. And I'm not advocating necessarily spending that on anything other than emergency situations. I think in our planning, we've kind of anticipated this spending and we're just, we're okay with it.
All right. Tom, another question for Tom Pasquale. I personally believe, and I keep on telling you this, I think on the back Main Street, I really think that we're moving too fast on back Main. We don't know what's going to happen to Main Street yet. We don't know if this going to two-way is going to be the golden umbrella to bring businesses downtown Fitchburg. I know one thing, if we play our cards right, according to what I read in the Wall Street Journal, and different places like J.C. Penney may go for bankruptcy, it can make a big difference down here at Searstown. We can be in pretty good shoes if we play our cards right for downtown Main Street. I keep on emphasizing that you had me go to the smart move growth thing, and they talked about green space that people want to be able to relax and enjoy eating outside and listen to music and all that. And in the lower part of Boulder Drive, I think we're going the wrong way. I think if we're going to do anything, we ought to move the road around then. You're talking about moving in anyway, the boundary line. So why don't we just move the road while we're at it? And that way you have that all that green area right in there, and then you can go across the park after with a crosswalk, a small road.
So
I don't know. I just think we're hurrying up too fast.
So, Councillor, I can't tell you how much I enjoy hearing you extol the virtues of smart growth, and I'm with you 100%. And I actually think with this project, we're taking baby steps to allow us to be more flexible in some of the ways that we've talked about in the past. For example, the closing of Boulder Drive. In a permanent sense, I'm not sure if we'd want to make that decision today because the ramifications of us not having Boulder Drive and us needing it would be severe. But I do think what this would allow us to be able to do is for events like the Nashua River Brewers Festival or for events like Civic Days, we could close down Boulder Drive or Main Street at any given point in time. And, if it ends up working, as you've stated, maybe that's a long-term solution we could look into. But at least in the short term, it could provide, a nice amenity for big events like that. I think in terms of shifting where Boulder Drive actually is located right now, I know a plan about 20 years ago looked at having Boulder Drive follow along the Nashua River, thus kind of opening that whole parking area up to direct access to downtown. I think it's a great idea in theory. I think there are a lot of roadblocks to it. The first is cost. It would drive up costs considerably, both in takings and the work we would actually need to do to construct that road. But I also think there are some elements of the configuration that currently at least couldn't quite work right. But again, that is something we could build into a future phase of the project if we can get this one done, which is really going to help us get the functional aspects down in the first place.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'm only going to say one thing. I'm going to go based on Mr. Brooks' recommendation, I'll probably accept the 600,000, but I want to make sure that we have enough funds for next year that if we can carry this over to next year to make sure that we don't have to lay off employees, then I'd rather see that happen first to make sure that we get our budget set and that we don't have to lay off DPW, because most likely we'll end up cutting DPW if we make any cuts, and I don't want to do that. So I want to make sure we have financial stability in the city of Fitchburg so we won't have to lose anybody, because these are hard times and it's going to get worse. That's all I want to make sure.
Council, I share your concern, as I'm sure everybody does, not only in this city, but in the state and the entire country. Where I fall on this is, number one, we have already committed to this project and we've already accepted the funding from the state. And we've already delayed this project again. We have $3.8 million in free cash right now. If we approve this, we'll have 3.2 million, and it's May 12th. So I believe, the fiscal year ends in 6 weeks. And I am all but certain that aside from this, because this is no surprise to anybody that we're getting this request, that the auditor with the mayor and I know this for a fact by speaking to both, that they are very conscious of what's going to take place next year in the finances. And, even with this appropriation, we've got 3.2 million in free cash, and we've got about $7 million in stabilization right now. The city, in my opinion, is in a position to weather this one-time national emergency, and that's what this is. So I have confidence in Mr. Brooks's statements about us being in a position where we can address these emergencies next year. But I want to make a comment related to that while free cash is for one-time use for emergencies, to me, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to use any of the free cash for next year's budget, because that's a one-time emergency we're covering, and it's not going to happen after that year. So my point in saying that is, between stabilization and the available funds we have left right now, you're talking about $10 million. And that's if we need it. And we're not there yet. So this is a special case where we've already committed, we've already delayed, and the state is picking up over 3/4 of the tab. So I would be concerned, like you, sir, if we had no free cash left after this, if we had dangerously low levels of free cash after this. But the fact that we have over $3 million right now with only 6 weeks to go, that is definitely something we need to look at as a committee for the next 6 weeks about how we're going to use our free cash going forward. Because like you, I would like to hold at least probably 2 million of that in contingency just in case. So our options are more expanded. You don't want to use free cash to balance a budget, but you should use it if there's an emergency, because free cash and STABE are basically the same bucket of money. Just, it's easier to use one than the other because you don't need a 2/3 vote. So I share your concern, and I would have that concern again if we didn't have a lot left. We have a considerable amount left after this if this goes through, a very short time period left of the fiscal year. So, and I'm sure the mayor and the auditor and his team are very conscious of that in terms of future requests out of this fund from now until July 1st. So I have President Kuchmarek next.
Thank you, Chairman DiNatalia. I appreciate it, and thank you to Mr. Skorowski for the presentation. Chairman DiNatalia, I appreciate you addressing Councilor Boschman's concerns, and this is a kind of echoes a conversation I had with Mr. Brooks earlier today about use of free cash and availability of funds for what we know will be some hits to our budget. That said, we know globally and even locally, we're feeling a hit to revenue streams. I still think it's premature for us to be talking about layoffs and where those layoffs might occur. in any such departments. And I think, Mr. Chair, you stated it well that because of good planning over the past 5 or 6 years, we've built up a sizable stabilization account that is meant for exactly these types of scenarios where you have a one-time emergency or hit to your revenue stream or need for cash, coupled with good planning this year that allows us with some available funds to allocate as we need it. And I realize that folks will be saying, you know, is it prudent to make this kind of investment in the current climate? But I think we can't understate the once in a lifetime or once in a generation aspect of this project of how long have we been talking about needing to make major modifications to Main Street. And I think we've always kicked that can down the road saying, well, now is not the right time. And now is not the right time. For the past 7 years, we've been making, you know, modifications to Main Street in one way or another. But in particular, over the past 2 years, we've been moving in this direction. We've already made minor infrastructure improvements and investments, knowing that we're moving in this direction. We've spent considerable staff time and resources securing state funding to get us this state grant. So I think we'd be wasting our resources for us to either delay further or to pull back from this project. So I think we address both short-term and long-term needs of the Water Street Bridge is being done no matter what. This will help ease congestion in some ways, but it almost necessitates that we make adjustments elsewhere. And this project will help tie in and dovetail with the Water Street Bridge Improvement Project. So it's addressing that short-term need and the traffic patterns in our downtown, but long-term, as Councillor Boschman aptly pointed out, with the large box store retail operations closing and the current crisis may exacerbate that, we're hoping to see a return to downtown. And we're seeing that across the country. And so this is part of our long-term and mid-term economic development plans of reinvesting in our downtown. And if we're talking about how we, after a short-term hit to our revenue stream, how we continue to bring funds in to our budget and how we continue to build business, this is exactly it. We want to support the physical infrastructure that allows our economy to return back and to be stronger and better than it was when we entered this year. So I look at this and say this is a good investment in the long-term economic infrastructure of our downtown, and not to mention we have tens of millions of other projects between City Hall, the theater projects, and the B.F. Brown and artists community that all tie into this. So we're going to have increased congestion and increased traffic going down there soon. We need to make those infrastructure improvements that align well with those projects. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
President Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councilor Zarella and Krishmerik in that I think this is very timely for us to take advantage of these funds that are being advanced to us from the state. Our investment of $600,000 in comparison to what the state is providing to us is although it's not a small amount in terms of what the city is putting in terms of the overall project, we're paying a very small percentage of what we're going to get in return. I have one question for Tom, and that is kind of, looking into your crystal ball a little bit. Do you see this as a one-time request, or do you see any reasonably foreseeable additional requests for additional funds in connection with this project?
I wouldn't foresee anything additional beyond this. I mean, the environment that we're in, this public health issue, there's so many uncertainties involved, to be sure, but I can't imagine so. And, to Councilor Boschman's point earlier as well, I don't want to lay anyone off either. None of the department heads here do. I think we're all trying to manage our budgets, prudently, and we are trying to only spend what we need. And just want to reassure everyone at this table, the grant funding that we have, whether it's Complete Streets or Mass Works, that's what we're going to be spending first. And hopefully this will supplement that. But I can't anticipate having that happen once again.
Okay, thank you.
I have Councilor Zarella next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to re-emphasize the stabilization fund. I've noticed we often sort of forget that we have it. And in a way, I'm kind of glad we do, because if we forget it's there, there's no temptation to dip into it for things that we really don't need to be dipping into it for. But it is there, and we've done a really good job of growing it. So this is exactly what it's there for. Because we've done a good job with that, that's why we don't need to panic about whether we'll be able to afford things next year, because there's no point in having it if we don't use it in a situation like this, if needed. I would hope at least, that before any layoffs happen, before any, major cuts to services happen, we would look at it. And if it is, as we expect, a one-time shortfall, not a projected shortfall long into the future, we just patch it from the stabilization fund and move forward. And I think that one of the worst things we could do in a situation like this is to put everything on hold, is to act like we just have to sort of hunker down and not do anything until the crisis is past, because then we're going to be on the back foot like we have been in the past, where other places, other communities choose to move forward. And we've talked a bunch of times over the past few years about times when other communities moved forwards and Fitchburg dragged its heels. And we've been fixing that for my entire time on the council. I don't want to see us make those same mistakes again, even though we've never faced anything quite like this before. We need to be sensible about it. Not reckless, but also not catastrophizing and projecting out these terrible consequences that may never happen. We just need to look at the situation on the ground and respond accordingly. We've got the reserves, so I'm certainly not advocating that we go nuts with our money, but at the same time, we need to take opportunities as they come to us, even though we can always say, well, this might get worse and we might need much more money down the road. We can't predict that. There's no possible way to predict that. And so I think we need to trust in the sound management that we've had for the last several years and trust that that will carry us through any shortfalls. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, no one wants to use this money. And the reason why I'm allowing this discussion is because it's relevant in terms of planning ahead for the future. This is available funds. My own personal take on it is, for the administration, is they do not use stabilization, that they would use the free cash for now. But again, as President Kuchmarek said, this is premature. It's not premature in the sense that we don't know that we're going to have problems next year potentially, but premature as to a value, as to an impact, we don't know. But I just want the public to understand again that between stabilization and free cash, we have $10.2 million right now to cover any one-time major emergency such as COVID. And that's because of the proper planning that has been taking place over the last several years. And the $3.2 million of free cash that would be in the balance, if this were to pass, is more than the yearly average of free cash we have recognized every year. So I believe we're in a good position right now to weather a storm like this, whether we do this or not. In this instance, it's a special case. We've already accepted the grant. We've already delayed the project. State's picking up 85% of it. This would be a different conversation if we were talking about the grant right now. And I think the state at that time would probably give us some latitude in saying, well, we don't want to accept a grant right now that we're going to have to pay money for because now we know what we know. This was all done months before this crisis hit us. So to me, it makes sense to move forward with it and be cognizant of any future available fund requests after tonight's meeting, bearing that in mind. I know I will be. But for this is no surprise. This is required to complete the effort, and but it's a good discussion to have. Councilor Boschman?
I just want to make it very clear, because I'm all in favor of a two-way Main Street. I've been fighting for a two-way Main Street for a long time. But I'm also worried, very worried, because I read the newspapers and I watch the news like everybody else does. Nobody can predict the future, but the experts, not me, the experts saying that this is here for a long time and it's going to affect a lot of things. This COVID virus is not just because we're going to open the states, it's going to solve your issues. They're not going to bring people back in the restaurants, but we're all afraid. I'm afraid. And I'm one of those guys that have the underlying conditions with asthma. All I'm saying is I want to make sure, we talked about the $7 million, the one-time use we can use it for. Why would we want to use it right now? There might be something else down the road that we want, something more important. All I want to make sure is that the 600,000 or 3.2 or 3.8, we have it in reserves. I don't think it would make a big difference if we slow down and really make sure that everything is going to be covered and we got everything in our line for everybody. I'm retired. I get a pension. I get Social Security. I'm entitled. So I'm just worried about the guy that has to work and has a family to support. That's who I'm worrying about. And I'm in a position, believe me, I'm going to be very, very tight with the budget because I got to worry about my neighbors. So I want to make it very clear that we better make sure we know what we're doing here because there's going to be a lot of things coming down. So that's all I want to say. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on this is, again, I don't disagree at all with the sentiment and the mindset of being cognizant of the next few months of what the budget's going to be like. What I'm trying to do is put into the proper context for the viewing public our financial position right now, as opposed to where it was 12 years ago prior to the Great Recession. We haven't had a reserve of north of $10 million for, I don't think, ever. Certainly not in the early 2000s or late 1990s. If we are not in a position now to weather a one-time national emergency, and that's what this isn't a recurring every single year for the rest of our lives, we're going to have all this happen. I'm not convinced that's going to be the case. But again, it's a year-to-year basis. We can assess it at that time. But the fact that we have this amount in coverage gives me confidence that we can weather this. If you asked me that 10 years ago, I'd say absolutely not. And again, if we had no free cash left, I would still say the same. I would say it differently. I'm concerned. Even with this appropriation, we've got more free cash in the bank than we did on average for the last 10 to 15 years prior to 2017. So it's not that we're not cognizant of the risks, but the stabilization, as much as I don't want to touch it, if there was, God forbid, a reason we had to, this would be one. So if we're not in a position today to weather a one-time national emergency, I don't know when we will be. 12 years ago, we weren't in a position, and we all know the amount of layoffs that ensued. So again, this is a special circumstance. And we have to be cognizant after tonight of any other available funds that may come to us and really assess whether that's critical at this time. And we can have that discussion in the next Finance Committee meeting if and when the mayor submits to us another free cash appropriation. I have a motion made by President Kuchmarek to approve and seconded by Councilor Zarella. Roll call vote. Councilor Zarella,
Yes.
President Kuchmarek,
Yes.
Vice President Walsh,
Yes.
Councilor Boschman,
I'm going to have to say yes.
and myself, Councilor Di Natale, is a yes. So it is unanimous, 5-0. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Moving on, we will take up 108-20. Order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $455,000 to be charged against reserve for other municipal purposes, capital expenses, and credited to capital fund parking garage renovation account for the purpose of repairing the stairwells at the Putnam Place garage. We have here this evening Treasurer Cervantes, who submitted a letter to the mayor dated January 22nd, 2020. I respectfully request an appropriation for repair of the stairwells at the Putnam Street garage. The stairwells are in poor condition, especially the southwest stairwell, due to many years of rain leaking in through the roofs. The preliminary cost estimate from Ty and Bond for construction is $455,000. A copy of the estimate is attached. Ty and Bond expects to have design and bid documents ready by late March, at which time a more precise cost estimate will be available. Funding is in place for the design work. Over the last 2 years, major repairs to the Putnam Street garage have been completed, including joint sealing and concrete and drainage repairs. This is the last major repair project needed there, and will bring the condition of the stairwells in line with the remainder of the garage. Thank you. Treasurer, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, just one thing that I'd like to add. This have deteriorated to a point where they're becoming unsafe for those who use them. The landings and the stairs are basically rotting and becoming uneven. There's metal strips along the front of the stairs that are coming loose, and I believe that it's just an accident waiting to happen. Somebody's going to trip and fall on those stairs someday.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment that just to emphasize that this is a transfer within the budget. This is not an available funds appropriation. This is already budgeted funds for FY 2020 for capital needs, of which, of course, this is one of them. Any questions from the committee? Councilor Boschman, you're first.
These questions to Ann. Ann, did I hear him say we're going to do both stairwells, the one in the front and the one in the back?
Yes.
Now, you said the roof was leaking. When I was down there, I went down there today and checked it out because I called Mr. Brooks up to find out where it was. My question to you, I noticed there's windows in front of the steps. So snow must be getting in there in the wintertime. So that means we must be, when we shovel out the snow, do we put ice melt down on there or rocks out on those steps?
I don't believe so, no.
And my second question, with the city moving ahead on Main Street with the new city hall, are we going to have the customers that we anticipate to use that, the garage? Because I was up there, it was pretty well empty today.
I don't know what the plans are with the new city hall, but with all the discussion I've heard tonight, it sounds like the city's very interested in attracting people to the downtown, and having a garage that's in good repair and safe for those who use it can only enhance that.
All right. Okay. I'll probably go for it.
So just on that, I mean, I would expect the garage not to be full because of the pandemic. A lot of our businesses, actually, great majority of them on Main Street are shuttered right now until at least May 18th or whenever the governor decides to slowly reopen. So I wouldn't expect the garage to be full today. And I know that that garage is used a lot by City Hall employees and by employees at the FRA building, like the Registry of Deeds and DRS. And I know a lot from used to work at DRS that a lot of the employees there are working from home. So I wouldn't expect the garage to be full on a day like today. But this again, like the downtown transformation, we've done major repairs to this facility already. This is the final repair for this facility. It's a capital expense, one-time expense to complete the entire repair of that garage that has needed it 20 years ago. So I just want to make those points. President Kuchmarek next.
Chair, I think you just you stated that well. Of this is the continuation or the last step in a project that was identified and initiated long before the current crisis. And I look at this as it's $455,000 for that work to be done today. And we know project costs continue to spiral. And we know that damage, if left untreated and uncorrected, will only continue to get worse. So my point here is it's $455,000 today, and it would be easy for us to say, should we hold off on this? And I asked that question earlier today. But that doesn't change the fact that the stairs need to be fixed and the new concrete needs to come in, and that will only continue to be exacerbated with time. And so I think we need to get that done. Well, it's still $455 and not $800,000 2 years from now or 3 years from now. All too often, we criticize our predecessors and those who came before us for inaction when there was an infrastructure problem. We're here today with a plan and a funding source to be able to fix and correct a problem that could cost us much more down the road. And not to mention, as Mr. Cervantes really said to us, is it's a liability. And not just beyond the construction cost. I don't feel like paying for multiple lawsuits when people harm themselves by using municipal property. So we need to fix the property that we do have, and we need to fix it before the costs continue to grow. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Zarella.
Thank you. I just wanted to note very briefly that for at least the past 2 years or so, the stairwells of the parking garage have been something that's been mentioned to me by several Main Street business owners. So I'm glad that this is getting taken care of. And I just wanted to mention that this is not just something that was identified solely by review, internal review or anything. It's also something that's been highly requested by our business community in the area. So it's very definitely needed.
Thank you. I have a motion made by Councilor Boschman to accept. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the order 108-20. Roll call vote. Myself, Councilor Di Natale, yes. Councilor Zarella?
Yes.
Vice President Walsh?
Yes.
President Kuchmarek?
Yes.
Councilor Boschman?
Yes.
It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, moving on to 109-20, in order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $50,000 to be charged against reserve for other municipal purposes, capital expenses, and credited to library capital expense building renovation for the purpose of preparing and repainting the exterior windows of the library building. Letter here from Ms. Bernard, the director of the library, states as follows, dated April 29th. Please accept our request for a $50,000 supplemental appropriation for the window asbestos abatement and painting project. We are looking forward to awarding this project and having clean windows. Please transfer the funds. Thank you in advance. Ms. Bernard, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, one thing that happened this year is Senator Tran had earmarked $100,000 in the state budget for this project, and that money has been received by the city. So this 50,000 is to supplement that and be the balance that we need to pay for the project. The windows, the glazing on the windows is very loose in many spots, and we're really afraid the windows are going to fall out. So that needs to be fixed. Unfortunately, the glazing, it contains asbestos, so the project's a little larger than it could otherwise be. And then the other windows that don't have the glazing need some painting. So that's what that's for.
Thank you. Councilor Boschman.
The question, my question to you is $50,000 from the windows. When do we, I don't want to spend $50,000 when in 2 or 3 years, we're going to come back and say, okay, we'll replace all the windows and then because we're going to renovate the library and that $50,000 is gone. That's a lot of money. That's my only biggest concern about this whole thing. Our goal is to renovate the library, isn't it?
Hopefully. I think what we're looking at is a longer period of time than that. We don't know what the state budget is going to look like moving forward and how many of the projects ahead of us will get funded over the next few years. So it's going to be, the best guess is 4 or 5 years before they offer the grant to Fitchburg. We don't know that, and there's no way to know that for sure, because it depends on what happens to the projects that are ahead of us on the list. And then after they offer it to us, it's a year, well, 6 months to 9 months for coming up with the funds and for the funding plan. And then another, once that's done, provided the council agrees to do the whole project, it would be a year or 2 for design work before anything would happen. So it's going to be a while. In the meantime, we can't wash the windows on the outside because by using this power spray that we had people do for us before, loosens the glazing more and plus sends asbestos flying through the air. So we really can't do that. And they are pretty dirty. It's and dangerous, I feel. You can see some of the glazing is chipping away and it's going to be gone in some spots. And that's not a good thing.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Zarrella.
I just wanted to say I'm glad that this is being done. I practically grew up in the Fitchburg Public Library, and whatever it takes to keep it in good working order until hopefully we can get it renovated and brought up into the 21st century. I'm in favor. I will always be in favor of what the library needs to continue its operations.
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to comment, Ms. Bernard just mentioned this, that this is a safety issue as well. If the, what's holding the window in is no longer going to be holding that window in there, I think that could be a safety issue for people in the library and outside of the library. So I'd like to see this done as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, is there anything you'd like to add? Mr. Walsh is the chair of the library trustees, and he's here this evening as well. Would you like to add anything, sir?
Okay. I know Director Bernard has covered the aspects, and the councilors who have spoken have also, and it really is a safety issue. And as Director Bernard said, if all the funding gets approved for renovation, it's going to be multiple years before anything is done to the front of this building. And not having it done now really does become a safety issue, and appreciate the Finance Committee to approve the transfer of these funds. Thank you.
Yes, this is another transfer from within the budget. This is not an available funds appropriation. And it's for another capital project. So, I mean, A lot of the things we're discussing, actually everything we're discussing this evening are one-time capital needs, which is really good to talk about with respect to spending money within the budget or from available funds. And the fact that the state's already kicked in 2/3 of the costs, again, this is the opportunity now to seize on this, even aside from the fact that it's a safety issue. That's a whole nother story, which is very important as well. So I have a motion made by Councilor Boschman and a second by Councilor Zarella to accept the order. Roll call vote. Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
Councilor Boschman.
Yes.
President Kuchmarek.
Yes.
Vice President Walsh.
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale, myself, yes. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we'll go to 110-20, that there being hereby is transferred from within the sum of $50,000 to be charged against reserve for other municipal purposes, capital expenses, and credited to capital projects, Fitchburg High School lighting conversion for the purpose of converting to LED lighting. Letter here from the Chief of Staff to the Mayor, A.J. Terigny, dated April 27th, states as follows. The City of Fitchburg has received an allocation of funds totaling $248,564 from the Mass Department of Energy Resources, Green Communities Division. This was accepted by the Council on October 15th, 2019, order number 23519. These awarded funds will be utilized to conduct an LED conversion at the Fitchburg High School, as well as parts of the South Street Elementary School and Lawrence Joe Middle School. The LED smart technology kits will be installed, which are capable of dimming, sensing occupancy, daylight harvesting, and providing scheduling options. Total annual cost savings of this installation will be approximately $20,000. The lighting contract has been awarded to Prism Energy Services after conducting a series of audits, list of materials, and review of utility incentives. I am formally requesting an appropriation of $50,000. Prism expects to start installation in the coming weeks. And again, this is again, councilors, this is a transfer from within the budget that was earmarked as a reserve for capital needs. So that applies in this case as well, just like the library appropriation that we just spoke on. Mr. Terigny, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quick, I'd also like to thank Unitil. Unitil has a play in this project. They're offering approximately $60,000 and $65,000 actually in utility incentives to make this project come to fruition. So Unitil and MRPC also has been a significant help as well.
Thank you. I have a motion. Oh, actually, no. Any questions from the committee?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded to approve. Roll call vote. Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
Vice President Walsh.
Yes.
President Kuchmarek.
Yes.
Councilor Boschman.
Yes.
Myself is a yes. That is
Thank you,
unanimous.
Councilor.
Thank you. Last item on the agenda, 111-20, in order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division grant in the approximate amount of $23,332 for the purpose of said grant, which is to repair the down fence lengths surrounding the airport property. I have a letter here from Interim Airport Manager Peter Kettle, who's also with us this evening, to the mayor on April 29th, which states that he respectfully requests the city accepts a grant from the Commonwealth of Mass Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division for $23,332 and allow expenditure of said funds from the grant towards the repair of the down fence lengths surrounding the airport property. There are two down sections along the interface between the AKS recycling plant and the airport at 150 LF and one section of down fence along Crawford Street at 50 LF. The grant from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division covers the work in its entirety as a 100% grant, so there will be no city match for this. Mr. Kettle, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, please. Chairman Di Natale, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's not just putting a fence up, it's making the actual airport a much safer place. In between February and March, we had up to 25 deer in one time on the airport runways. Thank God there was no accidents. Knowing that, I contacted MassDOT Aeronautics and they said there was a grant going, which was 100%. The down fence basically was caused by the deer themselves hitting the top of the fence when they were jumping over them, because our fences aren't to the FAA specifications. Our fences are only 7 feet high, and the new specification for the fences around an airport are 10 feet. Now, we're getting this grant purely to fill in the holes. It will make it safer for the airplanes because we've never seen that amount of deer on the airport before. And those down fence areas were where they were coming through, definitely. Luckily, having been on the commission now for about 12 years, there is a CIP grant in effect in 2022 that's going to put a brand new fence all the way around the airport at 10 feet high. And that is an FAA grant. So it's not just putting the fence up, councillors, it's making it a safer place. And I would like to ask for your approval to spend the $23,000 at 100% grant to make the airport safe again. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kettle, this is just to repair those down sections, you said, right?
Yes, sir.
And the full replacement of the fence will not be for another couple of years?
2 years.
The FAA grant?
Yes.
We don't have that grant yet, obviously. We're going to pursue that, I take it.
Yes, it'll be on the CIP, which is being planned and confirmed in September, October of this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I when I drive by that airport, you know, that fence in some sections is an eyesore. So it's good that we're going to fix the parts that are the eyesore. But then, as you mentioned, it needs to be modernized to the current standards. And I'm glad to hear that we're going to be receiving another grant down the road for just that effort. So at least in the meantime, this would make it more aesthetically pleasing.
Can I just comment on that?
Yeah, sure.
It might not make it more aesthetically pleasing. I wanted to put in 7 feet, the same as what the rest of the airport fencing is. And I was told, no, it's got to be a minimum of 8 feet. So you're going to have a little bit of a cancellation effect only on Crawford Street.
Okay.
The other 250 feet lengths, linear feet lengths, are between AKS Recycling and the airport. So
is there a reason why? Not to belabor this, but if the requirement is 10 feet, but this is just to repair, why are they telling us 8 feet?
They would not give us a grant unless we went to 8 feet.
I would expect them to say, okay, make those sections 10 feet, but I mean, it wouldn't make any sense either. So I don't. Well,
then it would look even worse.
Yeah.
3 foot like a castle. It just wouldn't look right. But we've only got 50 feet that's going to be unpleasing.
Well,
and it's only for 2 years.
They're paying for it, so I guess they call the shots on this one. We'll make it 8 feet. Any questions? I have Councillor Boschman first.
Hey, Pete, the reason why I asked you, on Crawford Street where the fence is down, did that get hit by a car?
I believe it was a car, yes.
And we never found out who hit it?
No.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kettle. I appreciate you joining us this evening. And I appreciate your work in this interim period of time. This is, it's wonderful to hear in an urban city that we have a flock of deer, so close to urban areas. We don't want flocks of deer on the runway, that's for sure. This is a no-brainer. This is 100% reimbursement. There's no reason why we wouldn't accept this. And I appreciate you talking about that long-term plan to really address both the aesthetics and the security of the airport in the long run. So with that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve 11120.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded to approve the order. Roll call vote. Vice President Walsh.
Yes.
President Kushmer.
Yes.
Councilor Boschman.
Yes.
Councilor Zarella.
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Councilor Di Natale. It is unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Roll call vote. Councilor Walsh.